The Expanse is often referred to as space Game of Thrones, and it's true on a broad level. On one corner there is a complex and brutal political conflict with protagonists on all sides of the ideological spectrum. On another corner there is a Lovecraftian mystery from the unknown, forcing everyone to collectively face a new frontier. But the differences aren't just that there's spaceships instead of boats or guns instead of swords. Instead, it has a different awe-inspiring thematic ambition, an exploration of the epistemology of human society. Epistemology is concerned with the nature of knowledge and how we validate or justify our beliefs. Think of it as the theory of knowledge, because human beings lack direct cognitive relationship with reality. Every interaction we have are unavoidably processed through our perceptual systems. Therefore, even truth as a concept holds an interpretivist dimension to it, because this means knowledge as we know it is by nature an approximation.
You seem real enough.
Okay. Couple 100 billion brain cells in your skull. You got more synapses than stars in the universe. You are a fancy hand terminal with a lot of buttons. And I push a few trillion of them buttons in exactly the right way. Ta-da! You're talking to Miller.
So it's a magic trick.
So's your whole damn reality, kid.
But culture, and especially political ideologies, tries its very best to keep society cohesive in spite of its inability to truly grasp or even facilitate the totality of everything accurately. And this idea of the gap is one of the central pulses to the Expanse. In season 1 and 2 of the show, and in Leviathan Awakes, which I've only started reading so I might miss some stuff, political communication is the central focal point in exploring society's inability to grasp at objectivity, because the entire political landscape is fragmented between Belters, Earth and Mars, where the scary tension between each place distorts the social reality that everybody inhabits. In Lexicon of Lies by Caroline Jack, she discerned that misinformation is the unintentional circulation of false information that inadvertently misleads, and disinformation is the intentional behavior that purposely misleads. And in the beginning, Holden, as an act of self-defense, broadcast a message declaring that the Martians had destroyed the Canterbury, a defenseless working-class ice hauler, which immediately exacerbates the political tensions because the different political groups begin to use this as an excuse to reinforce their own influences through controlling the information landscape.
Heard it was Golden Bow. Took out the Doniger. OPA's got gunships now too.
Things are just getting started. Outsiders won't pay us no mind unless we make them.
But ultimately, all of this is a hollow reaction, as the corporation Protogem was the real destroyers of the Canterbury, and they had deliberately planted Martian evidence in order to stir up such a political theater that they can execute a mass experiment quietly. It's weaponized disinformation. The effects are broken into 3 areas. On the citizen level, misinformation becomes a barrier for people's ability to develop accurate opinions.
Remember the cat.
On a political level, it becomes difficult for governing forces to decide responsibly. Christian Avasarala's storyline deals with her struggling to protect Earth politically while blinding fear arises as the Martians and the UN are getting dangerously close to war. And there is the cultural level, the growing atmosphere of cynicism that is cultivated on a large societal level. Miller's storyline tackles with this. He refuses to take any side because each ideology that mobilizes people are only going to swing the political inequality pendulum the other way, so there's no point in trying to fight for a belief when humanity is seemingly destined to never be able to live in harmony together.
So we cut off all the heads, rule the whole system.
System rules you, kid. Always has.
Even more reason I choose to fight.
You don't choose anything. You're born into it, man. One side or the other. You play it out.
And this all highlights the transformation towards epistemic democracy, the multiplication of identity communities with different beliefs of what constitutes with truth. There's an inherent epistemological conundrum here because the very foundations of dependable collective wisdom are now being eroded away by antagonism and fragmentation.
I need to know who is doing this and why. I need your help.
This has to be a mind game. You are the enemy.
We cannot afford to be enemies anymore.
But the story then zooms out and the boundaries between people are then suddenly redrawn as the protomolecule grows to become more prominent and becomes the central heartbeat of the story. The protomolecule is an unknown substance from seemingly another civilization, where Protogen had been trying to experiment with this whole time. But ultimately, the protomolecule is something truly alien, completely impossible to understand. It doesn't follow the laws of physics as we know it has no single use that we can morally judge because it's a weapon, a gateway, it kills, but also brings forth access to cosmological pathways beyond life and death. It is something that is.
I believe Eros was infected by an entirely new order of technology, something from somewhere else, somewhere beyond the reach of our species. I believe the Eros incident was our first contact with alien life.
And every character, every political faction tries to prescribe their own meaning into it, but it's always futile because those meanings are never truly accurate. They're all just simplifications that facilitate emotional meaning rather than truth. Earth and Mars sees it as a weapon against each other. Holden and the Rossi crew sees it as the biggest threat to humanity. The different scientists from Protogen sees it as the next frontier of human development, while religious characters sees it with a graceful sense of humbled curiosity. There are so many characters with so many different individual motivations that we see the fragmentation of truth alongside the erosion of collective solidarity. The protomolecule in a lot of ways represents the indifference of the unknown and that gap in our interpretations with reality. The Expanse then evolves into a story about the desperation to fill that gap, the acts of people trying to recontextualize their fixed logic into the unmapped and unknown. Many of the political boundaries from season 1 and 2 begin to close in season 3. Bobby Draper and Christian Avasarala, despite being a Martian Marine and an Earth politician, ends up working together. After the inevitable war finally happens between Earth and Mars, eventually everyone cooperates in order to investigate the gateway created by the protomolecule. New divisions are unavoidably constructed, but they're not political ones, but are existential ones. But if we zoom out even further and into the scary unknown where the relevance of the familiar holds no value, we realize that ultimately none of this matters. Our ideas, our science, and our entire political civilization is built in a universe that is completely and utterly indifferent to us. In the climax to season 3, the captains of the Belters, Martians, and Earth ignore their differences to willingly sacrifice themselves to destroy the protomolecule station and hope that it would save future curious travelers from entering the gate, as hundreds have already perished when the station out of nowhere stopped all the ships in mid-momentum.
This is your first time in Zero G?
Yeah.
Without gravity, wounds can't drain. Blood pools and clots, tissue swells, any internal bleeding is a death sentence.
The humans, regardless of their politics, they bled together, died together, and they finally unite together in an act of knowing sacrifice. But what's provocative is that this dramatic sentiment is meaningless, because as the audience we find out that destroying the station would only destroy the solar system, meaning the extinction of everything. And after 2.5 seasons of societal fear, cultural traumas, war, lies, and sacrifices from good people, all because of the incompatibility between different people's politics, when we get a glimpse of things finally fitting together, it doesn't actually fix anything, because they're unified under a misunderstanding of the situation. That gap still exists. The protomolecule station stopped all the ships not as an attack, but as an act of analysis, trying to understand if the human ships were a threat, and all it takes to show humanity is peaceful is to shut off the ship's engines for a moment. But after all the suffering, it's difficult not to demonize the inanimate station as some sort of enemy, the need for revenge or sacrifice. So the romanticism of the wider context of this climax is diffused from seeing Holden and the Rossi crew trying to stop the goal of this united effort. Our drama as a civilization might as well be the drama of a cell of bacteria traveling in the human body. And visually, that is how this whole situation is symbolically painted as. Specifically, whenever we see an establishing shot, there is no true meaning or moral arc of the universe in the grand totality of everything. That gap isn't something that is good or bad, it just is. Something that is absolutely unattainable by humanity. which sounds awfully nihilistic, but it's actually a rather hopeful sentiment about humankind because it's not about succeeding in defeating the indifference of the cosmos, it's about the preciousness of exerting efforts regardless, specifically making meaning in the face of having no moral materials. Everyone needs to watch The Expanse. It's a show about politics that never judges anyone's politics because you can tell the writers love all the characters, even the periphery ones. Therefore everyone is treated as flawed and as right and as wrong as each other. There's no embarrassing strawman argument that you often see in modern television. Instead, it's a loving exploration motivated by a sense of sincere curiosity about people trying to protect their meaning in a cold universe that has none. And I'm not sure about you, but that's pretty cool.